Hi everyone, welcome to the Sagittarius New Moon. You'll notice I'm filming at night. The lighting in here is a little bit different. Recording during the day I think was probably not a good idea. Just feels like people's energy during the day is very neurotic and they are going kind of crazy, and I pick up on that and it makes me go kind of crazy. That's not the reason that I've titled this video Edge of Sanity, though, and that's what I want to talk with you about today, because this new moon is really important. It's wrapping up over 3 months of drama for us. The fall has really been about being between states, okay, between A and B. And A is what I would describe as the summer. So we had a lot of planets being in signs that we hadn't seen them in for a very long time. Like Saturn hadn't been in Aries for 30 years. Around July, Uranus popped into Gemini. He hadn't been there since World War II. So, but then and I talked about this in previous fall videos about the timing of these retrogrades too, how they were correlated with all the lunations throughout the fall, going back to the August 23rd new moon portal in Virgo at 0 Virgo. Okay, so we had all these planets rolling back into signs that they had been in for several years. I mean, Uranus has been in Taurus since 2018, right? So it's just, there's all this old karma. It's a 9-year in numerology too, which is an ending year. So there's all this old karma. All the retrogrades are about review too. We had a pretty deep Mercury retrograde as well, going from Sagittarius back into Scorpio in November. So it has been a lot about processing stuff. And so if A is, I believe in the summer, and you can go read my newsletters or watch my videos from then. I believe in the summer. Summer was very bold to me. It just felt pretty loud. And the fall has been very mysterious to me. I have described it as mysterious. I try to preview stuff a little bit. Like now I'm talking about winter and talking about how it's going to be like a great systemic reset and pretty harsh, I think, for a lot of people. Not necessarily in a bad way. We'll talk more about that. But yeah, as soon as August started rolling around, I'm like, this is going to be a really mysterious fall. Because summer was very loud. All these big planets going into signs they hadn't been in for a while. And to me, it was like a taste of this new identity that we could have in the world, because the world is changing. And so, of course, we're going to have new identities and new ways of expressing ourselves and new ways of communicating and using communication platforms. Even technology is going to change as well. Okay, and so we experienced that, and then we have all these retrogrades. It's like all that stuff just got kind of pulled back, like, no, we're not ready for prime time yet. And even just beyond that, beyond the planets going back into signs they'd been in for a while, retrograde and kind of finishing up stuff, just the messages of the lunations, even the messages of eclipse season, the Pisces lunar eclipse on September 7th, and then the Virgo new moon eclipse, which was the second Virgo new moon, right? That in itself, that was a whole thing too, that we had 2 Virgo new moons, one of them, the second one being an eclipse at the last degree of Virgo, and it's messed up all the lunations. I've been banging on about this almost like every video this fall. I'll try to put a link in to remember to do that. I describe how this messes up the lunar dance, the natural lunar rhythm, where we should get like a new moon in a sign and then the full moon in the opposite sign after the new moon. But we've already had the Gemini full moon on the 4th of December. So we're going to have the Sagittarius new moon. And then a couple of days later, it's the Winter Solstice, which means once the sun is in Capricorn, the moon opposing that sign has to be in Cancer. So it's going to be Sagittarius new moon, Cancer full moon on January 3rd. Yeah, I mean, we should have had that Gemini full moon after this Sagittarius New Moon. But the problem is we don't have any gas left in Sagittarius. We've got 2 days. There's not enough. We need 14 days after a new moon. We need a 14-day runway after a new moon to get to a full moon. And there's 30 degrees per sign. And we're up at around 28 degrees Sag. So there's just no time to sneak a Gemini full moon in there. And it's because we had the 0 degree Virgo new moon on August 23rd, and then the 29 degree Virgo new moon solar eclipse on the 21st of September. So just fall has been really weird. And B is what I'm talking about. Winter is the great reset. Is there's this kind of level playing field where, I say level playing field, but we'll talk about this a lot, because this being the last fall lunation, it previews the fight. It's pretty warlike in the winter while wrapping up the fall narrative of having to kind of purge and tie up loose ends. There's going to be this flattening. Let's just kind of say that for now in the winter. And all those planets are going to go back into those signs that they were in the summer. And now it's like go time. And I think the identities that we felt in the summer were so intense because they're kind of, it's battle energy. But it was like, oh, the fight's not here yet. We've got to like wrap up some old karma. And then when the environment is like the fight is on, then you can have that kind of fighter identity go in and what I believe is defend culture from just complete decimation. Part of the mystery of the fall that has been helping us has been helping us enjoy a more textured life. And I think that that's going to be the resistance against the smoothification. I call it the glasslands that's coming from. And I'm going to do some real world examples of companies merging. Big companies are merging into bigger companies, which are merging into even more massive companies. And there's all this narrative consolidation, like in entertainment and marketing and so forth. AI, I'll describe it later. And it's just the idea of originality and of being able to participate and create a culture in the world is just getting erased. And it's just becoming such a very passive, flat, smooth world. And I think you can step into that arena and be like, I'm going to texture this up. I'm going to create a patchwork territory where I can like remix different cultural threads and identities, because that feels very original and sovereign and exciting and creative to me, instead of just plugging myself into just some gargantuan library where it's just this infinite jest of remakes and AI iterations, and there's not even really any human writers behind it. It's just this kind of metric driven generated content, or just just riding on vapors, just old content that just keeps getting recycled. So let's look at that. Let's dive in. A Sagittarius new moon is about truth. We have one every year between Thanksgiving and the winter solstice. And Sagittarius is about the good word. You go to the mountaintop and you scream it out to the world. And it has a very bombastic, almost kind of manic, evangelical kind of energy, okay? Now, this new moon is in a very tight square to Saturn and Neptune, which are at the end of Pisces. Okay, so this is interesting because Neptune rules Pisces, and the Piscean energy is very strong. He went in 2011, kind of late winter, early spring. As soon as he went in, we had the Fukushima incident. It's the Piscean water where things can be, it can be hell in an instant, but, throughout the 2010s, there was kind of a resurgence of culture and music. People revitalized neighborhoods, and there's a lot of like craft beer and local food and things like that. So it's also the kind of utopian fantasy as well. Um, so Neptune has kind of been amplifying that divergence, and as he gets to the last degrees of Pisces, that's very strong in culture, where it just almost feels very trippy, or even like a bad trip at some points. Saturn's been in there since March of 23, and now he's on. So just Saturn in Pisces alone is kind of stress testing. Like, are you seeing the worst in things? Are you seeing just only the best in things? You can see why, and we'll talk more about this too, why Jupiter, which rules Sagittarius always, there's no co-ruler of Sagittarius, a planet of expansive philosophical abundance. You can see why he was the ancient ruler of Pisces, with Saturn there now, because Saturn is ruling. If Sagittarius is your outlook and absolute truth, right? Saturn and Pisces revealing, if you always see the negative glass half full, or you always see things as, oh, it's just fine, this is always going to work out, just almost kind of pie in the sky thinking, I'm just going to stumble backwards and win the lottery tomorrow. It reveals why the ancients thought that Jupiter was the ruler before we discovered Neptune in the Victorian age, right? There's a truth element to Pisces that's similar to Sagittarius. So now Saturn has wandered very close to Neptune, and he too is near the end degrees. When big planets get near the end degrees, it gets kind of intense in culture. And so he's really riding that line in consciousness where things just seem like they're going to completely fall apart, or they're going to come together in some ways that feels very direct and like, okay, something makes sense. That's the essence in some ways of all mutable signs, right? Is that things are constantly falling apart and coming back together, whether it's the Gemini-Sagittarius axis or the Virgo-Pisces axis. Now, Sag is square that axis, right? And we'll talk more about that in a second. Sag is square Pisces and Virgo, just like Gemini is square Pisces and Virgo. Okay, so we have this new moon at the very end of Sag, square Saturn and Neptune at the very end of Pisces. Now, squares between mutable signs really kick up all that dust, and it makes it seem like there's a million bits of data flying through the air. But remember, what Saturn or Neptune is doing at the end of Pisces is like, let's kick up all this dust in order to kind of cohere it into like a singular direction. Saturn will tighten stuff up. He does have a good side. So then square Sagittarius, which has that truthful element as well. It's got that telephone line to Pisces in a way. It's like, oh, hey, I'm Jupiter land, but Pisces is old Jupiter land too. So some kind of truth is going to cohere as all the lies and all the fantasies get kicked up. And the sun and the moon being the activating, the new moon basically being the activating feature here in Sagittarius doing that, is saying, well, we always want to look to new moons and full moons to understand the narrative. They all stack throughout the year. And here we are at the end of the year. Here we are at the end of fall. We're about to go into Capricorn season. It's saying like, okay, what is it that's bringing this kind of like explosion of possibilities and then kind of cohering it into like a singular takeaway, so that it's like, oh, that was your fall. That was all the things that you like were like, oh, I'm going to do this. No, I'm not going to do this. No, I'm going to do this maybe if this happens. No, I'll do it if that happens. No, I won't do it if either happens because I want to do this, right? That's the kind of manic energy of the fall. and it's really heightening now, and it's putting us to this place where you could be at the gates of heaven, but it could be this roller coaster plunge into hell, right? And to me, I don't, I'm not trying to be really dramatic here, but I think that the plunge is like, you could just be like, I don't know, AI is just going to kind of eat us alive, and, it's over. But also the kind of the pie in the sky stuff too, which is just like, oh, it'll just blow over tomorrow. It's really this kind of coherence into like a final takeaway of what your fall. I'm using kind of more like big headline stuff. Like, you may be thinking about your mom or your job or your partner or whatever. Who cares about like AI? But that's what I'm saying is it's trying to cohere into something that feels truthful, so that you can say, okay, this is what I've been dealing with for the past 3.5 months that kind of landed at my feet, because I was in this mode in summer, like, maybe something new will happen in my life. And then it just seemed like I was mucking around in all these old patterns and frustrated as hell, and dealing with all these old resentments and maybe feelings of suspicion or paranoia or betrayal. It's going to cohere and be like, oh, okay, these are some of the things I was supposed to learn. And now let's go back to prime time. Let's have that kind of like intense energy from the summer again. And I've got my power back. I know that what holds me back, and I can go and do something important, because things are getting kind of, it's time to do important things, because the stakes are going to be very high in winter, where we don't have the luxury of all this kind of looseness. And even though it's been maddening, this luxury of kind of like floating and kind of juggling and doing the kind of mutable energy thing of like, oh, well, it could be that, or I could do this, or I could do that over there. It's just going to get really militant. And, people are going to be really focused on their alliances and wanting to be around other people who have integrity and who they can trust. And, they're going to get really focused on their goals and be really determined. And that can be for any reason. I think just a lot of it's going to be because they feel like something's getting reset. Things are going back to zero. And if you want a certain thing in life, you have to embody the archetype that can go out there and take it. We're going into a fire horse year in Chinese astrology. It's a 1-year numerology. So we're kind of making that leap from 0 to 1, like kind of like this reset into 0 is like, well, I'm not doing anything. And 1 is like, I'm going to stand up and say this for myself, right? It's also the North Node in Aquarius at Chinese Lunar New Year. So it's like, you got to have that independence to go out there and form, the field's open now. Although it's kind of bad that it's open, right? Because that's the morning of Pisces that we're going through right now, that kind of leaves us in this state of like, well, think about what ties Pisces and Sagittarius from a truth perspective is faith. If you think that culture is never going to come back, then you're just going to sit on the sidelines, right? But if you're like, okay, culture's been decimated, I'm mourning that, and that's a truthful narrative that I can take away to say, this is what I'm going to do in 2026 to make the world a better place, at least within my network of alliances. I may start like a small like herbal shop and sell tinctures to people or something like that, whatever the case may be, right? That's what this Sagittarius new moon is getting you in line for. It's helping you wrap all that stuff up. It's helping narratives cohere. And then it's saying like, it's very quick. I mean, Sun is going to go into Capricorn a couple of days later. Mars has been there for a few days already. And then Venus will follow shortly thereafter. And then Mercury goes there just in time for the January 3rd full moon in Cancer. Like, there's going to be a massive caravan of planets in Capricorn. So, that's very hard-edged cardinal energy. And so, yeah, this new moon is like trying to cohere a narrative. It's trying to help wrap things up, but also it is a new moon. Like, new moons are blank slates. Or clean slates, at least. It's just like, well, now you get to go do this. But it's going to be quick because, again, we don't have all that runway of more Sag days to be like, oh, we just had a Sag new moon and here's like 14 more days of Sag to kind of feel in to this coherent truth. It's like, boom, the truth comes in. It feels like a supernova. It's like, oh, like here's all this data, coheres really quick. And then it's like, boom, now you got to go do some stuff with it. Not a lot more time to just like sit and simmer with it like we've had with all these like mutable eclipses in September, for the past few months. So it just kind of lands on you. It's like, boom, here it is. And that's why things just feel so heavy. There's all these like violent headlines, all this dust is getting kicked up. People are just feeling like smashed and all kind of like beat to hell, right? Because they're just getting kind of rammed with data. All this mutable energy is just like, here it is. Here's all that stuff that and here's like one more thing from out from under the rug. Here's like one more person from your past that's going to like pop up on the phone. You kind of, I want to hash this out, all this kind of like old like karmic debt collection. Oh, it's crazy, right? So this wraps it up. Mars is in Capricorn, and who is the ruler of Capricorn? It's Saturn. And well, we just talked about how Saturn's sitting at the end of Pisces with Neptune that's getting squared by this new moon. And he's carrying a lot of that Martian energy. Mars is exalted in Capricorn. He started the year retrograde in Cancer, which is a sign he's debilitated in. And it was a really like getting off on the wrong foot at the start of a 9-year. It was this whole year. That's kind of like this year in a nutshell. Like, I'm just kind of like first step out the door, you like trip on some ice or something like that. Well, we're ending with Mars and Capricorn, where it's exalted, and it just adds to the sense that we are going into a stronger year. But I think Mars in Capricorn, even though he's exalted, it can be kind of cruel and kind of rigid, and it plays to this idea that I think that winter's going to be quite militant. In fact, he's just at about like 3 degrees, so he's going to be square the point at 0 Aries, his sign, where Saturn and Neptune will meet on Valentine's Day. And again, I'll talk a little bit about that. That's kind of like a global reset. Last time Saturn and Neptune met in Capricorn and Saturn's sign, the Berlin Wall fell, and it was the end of the USSR. And it was, Francis Fukuyama wrote this very important seminal essay called The End of History. Pizza Hut capitalism is won. The Cold War's over. There will be no more history books. Like, it's just going to be this new liberal world order that just goes on and on into the future. That's a pretty rough paraphrase, but so again, we do see that this new moon is like future pacing a lot of stuff that's going to happen in the winter. So yeah, I'm looking at that Mars in Capricorn, and I'm like, what are you doing over there? I can really just, the headlines this past week have just been so gruesome. It can be a very kind of like punitive kind of energy, and I think that's what I'm seeing. It's just like, if you were to co-op with propaganda, all these people are like in a state of like spiritual longing after drifting for so long this fall. And you wanted them to get into this passive position where it's like, oh, we've got to, I don't know, I'm just going to be like hyperbolic here. It's silly. But like, oh, you've got to like put a microchip in your hand to like go get groceries or something like that. You got to think like when Sagittarius and Piscean energy is really stressed like this, it's very easy for truth to become propaganda. And for lies to present themselves as truth. It's a really gnarly tension between this new moon at the end of Sag square Saturn and Neptune at the end of Pisces. And it's like, oh, okay, well, like, I don't know, here's XYZ bad event. This is why you need to do this. Instead of people being like, well, we could work amongst ourselves and create kind of like localized systems and networks to kind of get through this, which is what the universe wants us to do in 2026, going into 27 when, well, we're not there yet, but it's just going to get more like this. people could have that reaction. The universe is encouraging us to have that reaction, but it can get like co-opted really quick by this kind of like propaganda and this fear mongering. And I feel like that Mars is kind of like future pacing it. So Venus is very close to this lunation in Sag. She'll square Saturn and Neptune right around the solstice next week, going into Christmas Eve. And I don't know, that feels kind of weird a little bit to me. Like, I don't know, the holidays are always kind of stressful to people, even if you like them. And it just kind of feels like it's going to put people in this headspace of like, everything's happening. There's that book by Jonathan Safran Foer, Everything is Illuminated. I always kind of like the title of that book. But it kind of feels like that. It's like, oh, everything's illuminated. Like everything's getting like coughed up. And then it's just like going to kind of like cohere. And I think Venus is part of that. Mercury's a little bit later. He actually does it on New Year's Eve. So I think people are just going to be like 2025 was so bonkers. 2026 is probably going to be bonkers too. It's just going to be like this mental kind of, feels kind of like a mental breakdown kind of energy, but it can be fun. It can almost just kind of feels like laughing gas to me or something, like kind of delirious in a way. But another thing I want to point out is that when you get anything at 28 degrees of Sag, it's pointed to the Galactic Center, which is like, we're all kind of looking at the center of our Milky Way galaxy. Yeah, but what is it looking to, right? And it's this kind of, astrologers kind of harp on the Galactic Center as this kind of black hole that's emanating frequencies that update consciousness. And so it's interesting to me. It's almost like there's going to be this explosion of information, and when it coheres, it's almost because like all the lies collapse in on themselves, like into a black hole, and it's like only the real truth stands. Like all the propaganda gets revealed for being as corrupt as it is, and we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of stuff get exposed now. I think there's some credence to this idea of a galactic center because Jupiter and Pluto met there in late 2007, and that's when all this stuff about the mortgage crisis got coughed up. And it was like, I mean, if you had been actually reading in the summer, and even in 2006, if you had been actually reading in the summer in 2007, it's just so different because we just didn't have such a hyper kind of internet culture like we do now, where things are much faster. But people were kind of sounding the alarm then in mainstream press. They're like, this housing stuff just like, it's not looking good. And that's when it really started to come out. Because I remember by January, it was more of like front page news. Now people didn't really, by the spring of 2008, people were like, this is, I was like I was walking around, right, or traveling, and I'd hear people talking about it. I was like, okay, like once people like in the checkout line start talking about it, it's about to go down. And then a few months later in the fall, Lehman Brothers collapsed, and it was just, they made a movie about it. You could watch The Big Short. But yeah, that was kind of that moment of Jupiter in his home sign meeting Pluto at the Galactic Center. It was like all the data was coming up. Like NPR actually did, or it was like their economics division. It's like Freakonomics or something like that. It's like a 4 or 5 part series. Did a really good series on it right when it happened around 2008, and interviewing people who in 2007 were like looking at the data and they're like, yo, this is crazy. This is not going to just work itself out. Or if it does, it's going to work itself out by just kind of like collapsing in on itself. So I thought that was interesting. Then there was a new moon at 28 Sag back around this time of year, but in 2017, and Saturn was on top of it. He was at his end of his travels in Sagittarius. And then he went into Capricorn the next day, or when was that? It was a couple of days before the solstice. Yeah, and then he basically went in there about that time, and we saw this really terrible um, transit accident. They were doing an inaugural Amtrak run between Seattle and Portland, and uh, the due to the lack of training and signage as well, again, mutable energy, we're talking about like different putting pieces of information together. He took a 30-mile-per-hour turn at 80 miles an hour, and the train just couldn't handle it. And it was actually, the curve was an overpass going over Interstate 5. And since it was an inaugural run, it was like a big PR thing with a bunch of like, specific people in there, like enthusiasts and stuff. There was rush hour traffic, and the cars just like spilled over onto the interstate. It was just again, it's this example of like, if the data isn't serving the narrative, when stuff hits the galactic center, it just is like it bubbles up and then it just collapses into this black hole. So I think, take that into your personal life, and just like watch, like be careful that you don't just like kind of force a narrative on something, let it come to you. And that's why my previous newsletter and video was called Chasing Down Closer. Like, careful about chasing it, because once you get to this point, you don't want those kinds of metaphors in your life. I did mention that it's setting up the January 3rd mega Capricorn caravan opposite the Cancer full moon. Talked about how, it just seems like we're not going to get a lot of time. It's just going to kind of like cohere really quickly, and how it's vulnerable. That leaves people kind of vulnerable to being kind of co-opted into larger kind of macro narratives, rather than pursuing their own kind of textured micro narratives. Where is Jupiter, by the way, since he rules this new moon? Well, he's retrograde in Cancer. He's actually going to be near the full moon on January 3rd, and I think that'll be quite nice because a Cancer moon rules itself, and Jupiter's just going to kind of bless that moon as it's getting kind of stared down by all like the personal planets in Capricorn: Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars. Again, we'll talk about that when we get there in a couple weeks. By the way, I'm just going to jump in here. If I started doing weekly stuff, would you guys be interested in that instead of bi-weekly new moon, full moon? Comment on that if you'd like me to. I'm thinking about that. So here's the weird thing. Jupiter is the ruler of Sag, but he's in Cancer. Well, the moon rules anything in Cancer. Well, where's the moon? Well, it's a new moon in Sag, so we're back to the moon. You see how like circular that is? That's so rare that think about the mathematical probability of that. Jupiter rules Sag. Okay, so we have a new moon in Sag. Well, where's Jupiter? Jupiter's in Cancer. Well, the moon has dominion over anything in Cancer. Well, where's the moon? Well, now we're back to Sag. You can see, even in this, trying to work out the astrology, the circular logic at work here, like how much in a tailspin we can really get. It's so crazy. And by the way, I think I might have mentioned this before, but if I didn't, this is super important. 28 degrees, late Sag squares that 28, 29 degree Virgo new moon that we had on September 21st. That solar eclipse on the south node that was right on top of the sun and moon at the end of Virgo. I think that's just weird. That's really like, again, it's like it's all been coming to this point where at the last moment you can just kind of get all in a tizzy and just be like, I forfeit my choice to have some kind of personal takeaway from this. I'll just choose the most convenient option instead of the most textured, mysterious option. Just give me kind of like the Kirkland version of the spiritual takeaway that Sorry to all the Costco fans. The Kirkland version of like whatever spiritual takeaway I'm supposed to have here, God. Like, it's just like the example of how people could go into this winter reset just super passive. Yeah, it's almost like kind of like chasing your tail kind of energy, kind of like a dog just kind of chasing its tail. You don't want to do that. But it's interesting. I think Jupiter in Cancer is helping us to see that our feelings matter and not just adding up all the facts. The South Node is in Virgo too. We got to let go of South Node stuff. Virgo's about the facts. It's like, something looks good on paper, but is really that the truthful narrative that is going to help you feed you? That's Cancer, food mother, that's going to feed you spiritually. Yeah, you could look at it and it seems like culture's dead, but are you going to withhold your artistry from the world? Like, I don't know. That seems like you could say, well, this bad thing happening and that bad thing's happening, so I'm not going to break out my watercolor set. It's like, I don't know if that like really feeds you spiritually to kind of add things up in that way. So I do think Jupiter retrograde in Cancer is doing good work, and he's going to be, since this new moon sets up the full moon in Cancer with him on it, I think that message is here already, because he's going to get all stared down with the moon by all these Capricorn planets. Like, you better eat your peas before you get a piece of chocolate cake. And Jupiter on that full moon in Cancer is going to be like, I'm going to eat chocolate cake first and maybe some peas if I feel like it. Just like Capricorn's like, whoa, I'm the boss here. Like, you can't tell me what to do. I tell you what to do. Well, the moon is in its own domicile, so it rules everything there. And so it's very strong there, and Jupiter's strengthening it. So I think it's all set up now. I think it's set up to be like, you got to listen to that inner voice right now. You got to let that truth come to you. Don't chase stuff that like looks good on paper just because, it feeds your cynicism or your insane optimism too. It can go the other way. You can really drink the Kool-Aid at this time. Yeah, it's just like avoiding rationalization and kind of like justifying stuff because it's get that Kirkland spiritual takeaway. Like, I'm tired of just all the million of data points and like floating like I have for the past 3.5 months. Like, it's all shit or it's all amazing, just like give me that, it's just gotta be, you do that. And I think going into January, that full moon could be, man, that could just really toss you around. So I have framed this winter as, we are the big fish who eat the little fish, who eat the smaller fish, who eat the even smaller fishes, right? Like, that's happening. All this kind of conglomeration's happening. I'll point out some specific headlines of this. And then like, we give you access to this, and you just kind of have to plug into this terminal, and you don't have to go and create, right? These are the glass lands that are trying to take place as culture is broken down, versus us are like, okay, well, it's broken down, instead of just kind of staying in this kind of beautiful glass lands where things are just slipping and sliding around at fast speed, and it just seems all like glamorous and like all this content at our fingertips and stuff like that, looks out of it and is like, well, we can rebuild. Maybe you can't rebuild it in total. No one person can, not even like a small group can. And especially now where it's very hard to agree, it's like, well, we can create it in our own patches, and there can be this vast patchwork age where people are creating their various communities according to their own truth values. And sometimes you may be adjacent to them and work with them, and other times it just may be like, well, they stay over there and I stay over here. And that'll be interesting too. But I think the world is becoming so permafluid that there won't be any hard line enemies. Eventually there will be some way in which you find that you share some values with a team that you appear antithetical to. So I don't think patchwork age is hard balkanization. I just think it's just like a little bit more complex. So that, you could have that, or you could just have the Glasslands, where it's just like, I don't know, Disney buys Sora and you can just do infinite remakes with all the characters, and it's just, that's your life now. I mean, you can do that. It doesn't seem very fun to me. So, and I like to have fun. So I think you do too. And I think it's more fun to go out and make stuff. So let's look at some charts right now. Let us look at some charts. It'll be fun. How do I want to do this? So this was the full moon back on December 4th. We had the sun. Again, Venus was pretty close to the sun, as she is now for the new moon, staring down the full moon in Gemini. Here they are, as I said, Sag and Gemini are square stuff in Virgo and Pisces. Well, what's in Pisces? The North Node, which is our spiritual North Star, saying more mystery. South Node in Virgo. What's Virgo? Is facts. It's like, okay, like, don't be so obsessed with the facts. Saturn and Neptune here at the end of Pisces, a little bit further down from the North Node. North Node's about mid-degrees now. They're at the end. I was saying Mars at that time. God, I keep kind of hitting my mic here. Mars at that time was at the end of Sag, squaring. He's leading the charge, right? Mars is now in Capricorn, and he's like, let's go. I was in Cancer retrograde in January 25. I'm ahead of all you guys now. You guys got to follow me. It's a 1 year. Saturn and Neptune are going to be at 0 degrees in my sign, the number one sign. I'm number one. Come on, guys, let's go. Let's start making stuff, right? Or if the more the kind of like Glasslands cartel is like, we will consolidate and you will just be a passive access point to all of that. Yeah, so Mars was square that Saturn and Neptune. So it's funny because now the sun and the moon are where, it's so funny how stuff is lining up at all these lunations in the fall. Now the sun and the moon are where Mars were at. And guess what's here? Guess what's here at about kind of like 13 degrees, 13 degrees Pisces, North Node, 13 degrees roughly. South Node in Virgo, that was the 13 degrees. Sun and Sag, 13-degree moon in Gemini. Nothing transiting in Gemini now. But guess what's at 13 degrees? Mercury. And he was the ruler of this full moon. And we'll talk about that in a second. So Mercury, these like pockets are getting occupied by planets, and very particular planets too. Like, how interesting that Mercury's kind of filling that gap. And we talked last time how, like, when you get lunations or planets square the nodes, it creates these choice points. It's called at the bendings. It's a documented phenomenon. And it starts kicking. It's very similar to like stuff squaring Saturn and Neptune from the end of Sag in the Galactic Center. It just starts kicking stuff up. Well, where was Mercury at that December 4th full moon? Because he was the ruler of that Gemini full moon. So we want to know kind of like, what's the message that he's carrying? Because he's saying at this new moon, like, I agree, it's time to kind of kick up all this dust before it coheres. He was doing this. He was at where the new moon was on November 19th, at the tail end of Scorpio, opposing Uranus at the tail end of Taurus, who's been wrapping up his journey where he's been since 2018. There we go again. There's Saturn and Neptune at the end of Pisces. Nice little trine, 120-degree relation to Jupiter at that time, was at the tail end retrograde of Cancer. Kind of beautiful water trine making this kite, right? There's the tail. There's the nose, Uranus. These two water points in Pisces and Cancer creating a sextile. It's a 60-degree relation. This kite formation is a documented phenomenon, like at the bendings. It pushes things forward to the nose planet, Ernest at the end of Taurus is like, oh yeah, since 2018, I've said there's an app for everything, food, sex, work, and now you're sick of it because it's not a utopian promise like we all thought. So that was a tough November 19th new moon. Well, Mercury was going direct after Black Friday, and then we get that December 4th full moon in his sign, Gemini, and we go, well, where's Mercury? What's he doing? He's occupying the spot where the new moon was. And he's like, yeah, let's get the truth out about what's been happening in our culture. It is breaking down, but it's so we can build it back up on an individual level. So how interesting that he's now where the sun was for that December 4th. He's like, let's keep pushing this narrative forward. I'm going to kick up some dust after I told you at the full moon, to insist on seeing the raw truth. And, seeing the raw truth may be like, was it bad? Is it good? Maybe a little bit of both. That's what he's doing, occupying that spot. And then, like I said, the sun and the moon are where Mars was during that full moon. It's just so fast. The astrology of this fall has been totally insane. Also, like sometimes the moon just takes like 15 minutes to change signs. I think it was like 15 minutes between Libra and Scorpio this past Sunday. I mean, sometimes it can take half a day. I mean, stuff is just getting shipped out. It's so fast. And it's all kind of coming to this Sagittarius New Moon where it all coheres. Yeah, kind of see it as like a kaleidoscope, I guess would be like another metaphor where everything kind of like settles and you're like, oh, that's it. And then the kaleidoscope turns and you're like, no, it's not a hexagon, it's a triangle. No, it's not a triangle, it's a rectangle. So the answer could be anything, right? It's just, don't force it then to make it look like something that's good on paper, because it just, eases your mind. Make sure it kind of feeds your soul. That's that message, I think, of the Jupiter retrograde in Cancer. It's funny, because there was this whole thing in the 2010s, like Ben Shapiro, like, facts don't care about your feelings. Well, now it's like feelings more than facts. Mystery and texture, not the smoothification of things that make sense and the kind of the worship of cold logic. This is part of the beginning of the fight for originality in 2026. Well, I think, the way I would kind of cinch up this technical part of the video is that because Sag is the outlook, like if you're a Buddhist or if like you're a Zen philosopher, you're going to see the world through Buddhist eyes. If you're a Baptist, you're going to see it through Christian eyes. So Sag New Moon is about that absolute truth. It's like, what's your outlook in life? And people are like, well, it could be anything after this fall. With Jupiter being retrograde in Cancer, it's like, what path feeds you? Not what path makes like sense on paper and like kind of feeds this like righteousness. Again, remember that Mars is in Capricorn for this new moon, like that sense of like, culture's dead, and then this is like kind of like my kind of like evil fantasy to be kind of like nihilist or something like that, and I can just like find all these examples of why the world is like this, and then you wake up and you're like, I'm just like a chill person actually who likes to drink tea and like make tinctures and stuff. Like, why am I running that narrative in my head? Like, it's just not aligned with my archetype or my path at all. Just as an example. I think it's interesting too. It's interesting that Neptune and Saturn are at the end of Pisces to kind of make this square happen. Like I said, Neptune has been there since 2011. It kind of started off with the Fukushima incident. And now at the end, and I said that there were some good things, right? Kind of this like big hipster culture of brew pubs and kind of kitschy cafes and people riding one-speed bicycles. Sometimes it's called a fixed gear bicycle or fixie. So you see all this stuff on TikTok actually right as we're about to have this new moon and Neptune's about to go out of Pisces, which was all about literally the millennial optimism. And remember, why does Jupiter, the co-ruler, the ancient ruler of Pisces and the ruler of Sag, is because it's about philosophical optimism. Like, what is your outlook? So all these TikToks are coming out about the millennial optimism of the 2010s, and it's coming out now. And it's looking at the time that Neptune was in Pisces. And Neptune already in Pisces is about nostalgia. So it's like, but what are they nostalgic for? Was already this aesthetics of nostalgia. That was the value of Neptune and Pisces, was things were a little bit more antiquated, brew pubs, kind of kitschy cafes, fixed gear bikes. People got like a little bit more analog. That's kind of the treasure that we get from Neptune and Pisces. And so we're having like nostalgia for nostalgic aesthetics. It's so meta and weird. And I don't know, it's just very easy to rewrite culture and history from such an excessively nostalgic lens of like being like, we're never going to have this back. Like, or it was so amazing then when, I was in some of those places in the 2010s. And let me tell you, I mean, some of it was exciting. And I do agree, especially compared to, I mean, I'm out here saying like, we've got to fight for originality. Like in many ways, I like do agree with them, but like, it was also, there was some innocence there. Like, it's just the nature of technology right now. And Uranus and Taurus since 2018 we're kind of losing our innocence by apifying and commodifying and making humanity transactional. So yeah, I mean, there was a lot of good stuff back then, but like it was starting to get kind of bad back then too. So, yeah, I want to be mindful. I always say this, like, as I get to the end, I want to be mindful of like time. There's just like so much. I mean, this is why I could do like weekly videos too. Like, I want to talk about why the millennials created that type of culture in the 2010s based on the astrology of their birth charts. I'll just say for now, just as a kind of gloss on that should show you that there is a fight for culture coming up. And it's like, are you going to help build it? Or are you just going to be like nostalgic and be like, well, that was our last time that we could ever build. And now I'm just going to kind of sit in this infinite jest of remakes and just kind of like, sigh into my bowl of cornflakes or whatever and be like, well, it would have been great to have been like a hipster in 2011, but now none of us can be anything. Like, this new moon's going to be like, okay, you do that. Good luck when you get to the Cancer full moon on January 3rd, if that's how you think about it. Yeah, I do. I mean, that's a lot of what this astrology is saying is like, oh, you like the physicality of those times? Then take that forward into the future. I wrote down some like quick things that I saw in the TikTok. It's very fast. Those TikToks are like boom, 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 like all these images. And then they're playing this kind of like stomp, clap, hipster music from the 2010s. It's supposed to make you, it's good propaganda. It's like I'm saying, like, it's just supposed to be, it's like 30 images in 30 seconds, right? And it's just this optimistic music that's kind of dumb and hipstery, but kind of like has that innocence and it like sucks you in. And you're like, yes, I too am nostalgia for silly hipster nostalgic aesthetics. So I just wrote down some, I kind of like paused each frame and I was like, well, what's going on here? Like, what's really hitting our brains when we watch these things? Warehouses that kind of like turned into restaurants, cafes, lofts that were turned into apartments, brew pubs, antiquated clothing. There's like a lot of obsession with hats in general. Um, Physical passports, bikes, bookshops, ice cream shops. I guess was kind of a big thing that came out then. Like, hey, let's go get like boutique cupcakes or ice cream or something. That will be the kind of stuff I think that will stand in opposition to infinite streaming. This idea that you just kind of access this terminal of a collection of remakes, a library of content versus anything you can kind of engage with, or you just like watch remakes all the time, or AI just iterates like, oh, here's Ghostbusters 57, with this version as this person as the main character. So I just want to close out by running down some real world headlines describing how this stuff is real. Like, we do the astrology here, I do the narrative and help you understand how it's going to affect you at a personal level. But all of this stuff is astrology is real in the sense that it reveals the narratives of our world, and it's showing us, hey, like, open your eyes, like these things are happening in a pattern and in a repeat way for a reason. Well, you guys know, a lot of people commented on my previous videos. I like fashion. It's just one of my hobbies. It's just a personal interest. And I said that fashion is going to be one of the ways that we start to see this militant energy. And this viral post a couple of days ago was about Lockheed Martin, defense technology, getting into streetwear. I was like, well, shoot, there it is. I was talking about... who was it? Chanel. I was saying that their show had chainmail in it, and I was using Rose McGowan with Marilyn Manson in '97 wearing chainmail at an MTV event. That was the last time Saturn was in Aries, and I said, "Oh yeah, spring fashion capsules for when Saturn's in Aries for 26 are going to have stuff like chainmail." And she was wearing like a leopard print, cheetah print thong. Well, there was like leopard and cheetah prints and chainmail in the Chanel show that happened right around the December 4th full moon. I mean, that to me was crazy enough. And then I saw the Lockheed Martin thing, and I was just like, that's nuts. Omnicom is now the largest ad agency in the world. They now own all the stuff that made like the Got Milk campaign, or, use an Apple product right here to film this, the whole Think Different Apple campaign. Omnicom owns all of that. So that's what I'm saying. Like, a lot of these companies are like trying to be like, we're the only game in town. You want to be like a creative or something? Like, you can just fit right into us. We're like a $30 billion agency now. Or you can go and do, be in an avant-garde, be in the vanguard, and actually like make something you have creative control over. That's the fight that's getting set up. There's a Paramount bid for Warner Brothers, trying to outbid Netflix. Netflix, I think, was just going for like off-cable networks. Paramount's like, screw it, I want the whole thing. Which would end up being something like $200 billion in assets. Talk about having like a lot of narrative power and narrative consolidation. Like, that's the Glasslands right there. But again, it's like they know, these companies know that the fragmentation and the patchwork age is coming, and these like smaller textured patches where personal choice is going to win out over that stuff, or that's where the universe wants to push humanity. So you see stuff like YouTube TV is like, instead of having this one size all base bundle, like kind of harkening back to the big tent culture where everybody kind of had the same satellite dishes, everybody ate at Pizza Hut, drank Pepsi, watched Seinfeld, kind of water cooler culture. That was even still around in like kind of like 2007. But now Pluto has moved through Capricorn from 2008 to this year. Really was like after the election in 24. And now we have Pluto and Aquarius, and all this stuff's getting fractured and fragmented. And so now YouTube TV is offering like, oh, you can just get a sports bundle. Like, not everyone's part of the same YouTube TV family. Like, they acknowledge it. They acknowledge that the stuff's like fragmenting. It can't just be smooth and homogenous in these glass lands. Disney invested $1 billion in OpenAI, and just kind of so you can like see these remixes of characters through Sora generator, just kind of extracting the artist right out of the situation. Michael Miraflor is on X, and he had said, the Labubu trend didn't even make it to Christmas, and Hershey put out a Dubai chocolate product in 2 months to try to capture the Dubai chocolate trend. He said that's really fast for a large company like that, which I do agree. Like that, I think he said he called it like light speed. And just so the Labubu didn't make it. Hershey put this thing together in 2 months, and it's not even like going to be like, he was arguing a Christmas phenomenon. He's like, these faster and faster product cycles are crazy. And I've been saying that since Oppenheimer and Barbie came out, because it lasted 3 months. And then everybody was like, oh, Taylor Swift and Kelsey. I was like, that's going to last 1 month. And then like the Labubu thing is like, oh, okay. Like a few weeks of that in the summer. And then like Hershey's Dubai chocolate is just like, oh, a couple of weeks. Nah, it's not even going to be in my stocking for Christmas. It's because we don't live in the big tent culture anymore. Everything is fragmenting and fractionating and becoming more individualized and hyper curated. So the companies that are consolidating into even bigger companies, they are like, well, screw it. We're just going to throw stuff out there as fast as possible without the faith that it's going to stick. And really just like the culture that we have people plug into is like, we're not building anything. There's no real like enduring legacy or substance. It's just like, oh, you get like hit with Labubu propaganda for a couple of weeks. And here's like Dubai chocolate craze, but it never kind of feels like this extended thing where you go like a few years in the 90s and they're like, hey, it's season 6 of Seinfeld. And it's like, oh, I've been watching since the beginning. And like, oh yeah, let's go have some Pizza Hut together. And that was the whole like big thing, like Pizza Hut commercials with Russians eating it after the USSR fell. It's like, oh, it's this like kind of 90s capitalism where it's like, oh yeah, like even the enemies will eat the same products as us. And, we're all kind of talking about the same thing at the water cooler. Like stuff is just like evaporating now. And it's because the astrology is historical at this time. We don't want to eliminate agency. We don't want to eliminate ownership. We don't want to eliminate originality. And this new moon, this original message of coherence that this new moon is urging us toward is like, how are we cohering it in a way that doesn't make us just kind of fall at the feet of some monolith and say, well, it's all over now and a new cycle starting, but I don't have any kind of power in that world, in that new cycle. It's just all me against Goliath. Everything's just so consolidated and huge, and the universe is like, it looks that way, but it's actually the reverse, because all these companies are like realizing how fast and fractured things are, as evidenced by Miraflor's tweet about Labubu and Dubai chocolate, helmed by Hershey. It's just like, so all they can do is just try to kind of drop you into these glass lands where they can like fly fast symbols at you and make it seem like something's happening, but nothing's ever happening there. Or you can be like, okay, well, things are kind of fractured and fragmented, but I want that durability, that ownership, that agency, that community, those alliances, that sense of like momentum in my life. Then if it comes through me, instead of this kind of like manufactured environment, then we actually kind of get, I think, just multiple subcultures and micro tribes. There's just no mainstream versus hipster anymore. It's just this kind of patchwork, decentralized, horizontal world of everybody kind of piecing the world together through their own view, and it creates like huge opportunities for creativity and trade. It's almost kind of like a completely parallel economy in that way. Well, that some people would not be very happy with that idea. But people are going to see the contradictions and like, well, why wouldn't you support that in me? Like, why would you make me just kind of be some kind of like floating around, just some kind of like Dubai chocolate fanatic and all about Labubus? Like, I mean, that stuff is fun. Like, I get into like silly little trends like that too, but it's not my like only thing, and it could have been in the past, right? Like the pop culture of the past could have been your thing. Like I remember watching Seinfeld when it was new episodes, and it was fun. It was fun to talk with people about it, or just other TV shows. Or I was way into, that was a normie thing. I was way into like punk music and stuff, and I loved sharing that with friends. And but at that time, even punk music was elevated and taken seriously. Now there's so many subgenres. It's like someone tells me something and it's just like blah, 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 the kings of dark synthwave punk. And I'm like, what the hell is that? I find it interesting still, but I'm just like, it wasn't like once we got to the end of the 90s, some of that stuff was starting to be on MTV, and we had that kind of stable dialectic of like, well, if you're not in the mainstream, like the hipster thing is still like a known viable path, right? But there's no sticky kind of normie culture with like Labubu and Hershey Dubai chocolate. It is not a one-to-one with like Pizza Hut and Seinfeld. And then all the subcultural stuff is not like a one-to-one with the way that kind of like punk and emo started to like come into consciousness at the end of the 90s, into public consciousness. It's that stuff could be so obscure. It could just be, and some of it's amazing, right? It's just hidden on some Bandcamp somewhere, and your friend of a friend of a friend tells you. So yeah, it's just everything's just getting so textured and micro now. And I think if you're like, well, I could get this like semblance of yesteryear by going into these glass lands where these institutions and these companies are like, you don't have to think about culture. We manufacture it for you. And it's good quality. Like in the past when we manufactured it for you in the 90s, and it's like, no, it's not. Like it doesn't give you connection with like people you sit next to in school or someone next to you on a flight or something like that. It's not the same shared cultural conversation. Things are all fractured and fragmented now. So, and you can't even, they're so ideological fracture that, if you were from Team Blue and you sat next to someone to Team Red on a flight, and you kind of bonded over Pepsi and Seinfeld, it was like, oh, we'll just like call it a day. We disagree about the president or whatever in the 90s. And now if it comes up, it's like, well, I don't care if you like Hershey Dubai chocolate. I'm going to get really violent with you. And again, we are seeing that now in these very violent headlines around the Sagittarius New Moon. So individual choice and texture and micro producers and micro tribes are going to be very important very soon. Alliances are going to be very important. But this Sag New Moon is saying like your worldview and your outlook determines who you're going to tribe with. And it's asking, are you going to fall, for the convenience of like legacy systems offering this kind of false sense of security and false continuity and false future of like, if you buy into our vision, you will have a sense of like togetherness and cohesion, much like in the recent, not even going back to the 90s, like, oh, you could have like this kind of like that sense of millennial optimism that you had in the 2010s, if you just kind of come hang out with us. But, that's just a place where nothing ever happens. I think we're just seeing like a lot of, and I'm not saying like, some people are in there still and they're working in these large companies and they're trying to do the best they can. And they're kind of like holdouts or like Trojan horses or like, rebels in the husk of a decaying empire or something like that. So it's not like a judgment thing. I'm just describing for you what the astrology is telling us about the structure of our world right now. Wow, that was a lot. Find me on X at Zeitville Media, where I post more bite-sized nuggets about this stuff, so it helps you kind of like keep track of it on a more day-to-day level. Or I'd love to have you over at my newsletter. It's also zeitvillemedia.substack.com, and it's a written companion version. It's just kind of more of like a map of what I described here. And you know, I'm a writer, and so I always feel like the prose is kind of fun over there too, and I have a very devoted readership, so it can be another way to kind of cement these ideas. One last thing I'll say is this is after December. I'm not going to be offering my year in review 2026 reports anymore. I'm going to pop a link in there, and you can go read about it. But basically, it's a month-by-month view of the mega cycles in 2026 based on your chart. You get to ask like a question too, of like you're trying to resolve, like, should I sell my condo or get married or whatever. They just take time to produce, and I'm going to be doing a new offering in the new year. So I'm going to shift my focus to that, and a lot of people have been really happy with them. I've had a lot of fun making them, but the link will be there to apply. And yeah, if you feel like you want to see me more weekly now instead of just bi-weekly, you can talk about that as well. Please just, if you have any questions about this, I've had a lot of really good comments recently, and it's been a real joy this past fall to hear some really interesting and intriguing comments from people, and to have the discussion there, because as today's message is, like, we've got to start finding each other in order to really thrive in 2026. Is there anything else that I want to say about all of that? I think that's it, guys. Yeah, keep your wits about you. Stay cool. I know it's been tough for a lot of people. It just seems like there's just like a lot of craziness right now in terms of just trying to get settled on where things are going. And I put this video out here to say that that's just really par for the course right now. That's how things are. That's how things are playing out. Okay, so hang in there, and throw some stuff down in the comments, and I'll chat you up there. And then I will see you next time.